Welcome back to Preparing for the Unexpected. Today we're talking with Treena Reilkoff, and we're talking about turning trauma into a resilient asset. Great first segment there, Treena. I couldn't help but think when we were talking about bikes and falling out of trees, that was my dad.
Yeah.
Unbelievably, my dad. And even later in life, he wasn't worried about snowstorms. He would still go out walking, in a foot of snow. And he's like, "Dad, you can't go out. It's bad." And he goes, "Yeah,
Yep.
it's only snow. I've been through worse." And his dad, fought in World War II, so he had the same opinion of like just shrug things off, like been through worse. you know, and, and hopefully I got some of that too. So there were definitely some interesting traits that the two of them had.
Yeah, no, I don't think we take enough self-reflection time, right? To identify our own innate resilient traits or traits we want to develop and we know we have, but we want to strengthen. I always have I created just this acronym for myself because it helps me remind myself sometimes in those times of stress, conflict, that what do I need to pull out to get me to the next step, to the next day? And I kind of have a saying of like, let I move myself from SOS to SRSR. Self-reflection strengthens resiliency. So when we look at some of the traits and just come at some of my experiences, and I look from generations of my mom and dad, and then my grandparents who too came over. My Bob and Dito were in the Holocaust, right? Came over when they were 13, 14, not knowing anybody. So it's kind of looking at, wow, where does that come from, right? And how successful in the learning I got. So some of the traits and the learning I got from 25 years ago from Nan Henderson, and she was one of the gurus in California on resiliency, was she had there's 13 traits. And when you can identify what are your strengths or what traits you want to develop, then you can turn them more into assets. So, kind of some examples are life skills, use of life skills, good decision making, assertiveness, impulse control. So, when we think of the story of that young boy that, I supported to help, he had life skills to survive on his own for physical safety, personal safety, how he was building a community on his own. When we look at perceptiveness, insightful understanding of people and situations. Perceptiveness is developing your situational awareness. You're
Mhm.
observant,
Yep.
you're perceptive. You're not only visually, you're using all your senses. You use your spidey senses, that energy, right? That situational awareness is perceptiveness. Flexibility, the ability to bounce back, right? You failed. Do you take that failure and, just shut down? Or do you say, yeah, I failed. And what does fail mean to me? It's my first attempt in learning. Because if we don't fail, how do we learn?
I have a question about that because often when we fail, we don't want to try again. But sometimes we do want to try again,
Yeah,
but we're influenced by others not to try again.
right.
How should we deal with that?
And I think that comes from one's own self-reflection of asking yourself, only you will have your life and what you put into it and where you want to succeed. So, in that kind of question, how do you answer that? I always go back to the rocking chair test. Have you ever heard of the rocking chair test?
No, I don't think so.
So, when you think about your life and self-reflecting, and you're 80, 90 years old, sitting on your rocking chair with your memories, what do you want to remember? So if all of a sudden you're sitting there reflecting, you remember this time you failed and you wanted to go try again, but everybody around you didn't support you and told you not to. And now you're sitting there 90 years old, regretting not taking that chance. So whenever a situation comes up for myself, I always ask myself, will I regret not taking this chance? And whether I fail or succeed, it doesn't matter because I'm still going to have learning, growth, and experience that supports and helps me grow as a person, professionally, environmentally, in every area of my life. But I ask myself, will I regret when I'm sitting in my rocking chair reflecting on life, not taking that chance. Because unless that chance is going to hurt yourself or somebody else and is high risk of serious harm or death, why not take that chance?
Mhm. I agree with that. If I didn't take the chance years ago when Voice of America reached out to me, I wouldn't have this show. I wouldn't have the YouTube channel. I probably maybe not have written the last few books, and since then, so many other things have occurred, and all it took was just to take that one look at things. Like, am I going to regret doing this?
Mm,
And no, I don't, not in the slightest.
right? So when you take that whole personal, rocking chair test and risk, situational awareness, assessing, your choices and what presents to yourself, what does that look like in the workplace when we're talking about creating psychological health and safe workplaces,
Mhm.
right? That risk to speak up. Is your workplace psychologically safe that people feel safe enough to speak up when there is a concern or a conflict, or they have an amazing idea that might sound a little bit silly or might not be so receptive. But if you have that safe psychological workplace, you have that ability of a community to voice your idea, brainstorm it, because you never know where it's going to go, because none of us can predict the future,
Yeah,
right? And then if you want to mitigate risks of workplace violence and harassment, you have to be situationally aware and resilient and have that conflict curiosity and the courage, transparency, and vulnerability to say, you know what, we're all human, we screw up, but how about let's have this conversation and mitigate the risk so it doesn't turn into a more serious conflict or a
mhm.
traumatic incident for somebody, because we never know somebody's past history.
That's right. Yeah, we never know. I like what you mentioned there, an environment where people feel safe to ask questions and things like that. I couldn't help but remember my work as a project manager, where I would tell people, a lot of people would say, I was going to ask a question, but it's stupid, so never mind, skip me. It's like, no, no, no. The only stupid question is the one never asked. And
Mm-hmm.
then you carried it on. You never know where it's going to go.
Yeah.
It could spark other ideas. So every question is good.
Yeah. And kind of like even building on those questions, when you're having that team meeting or business meeting at the end of, the workday, it's the unit, it's the department, and the round table happens.
Yeah.
And everybody goes around the table and everybody is silent and nobody shares anything. I like to transform that into how about create a resilient round table? Because sometimes you don't know your own strengths. And I was listening to the audio book of John Maxwell on leadership. And it was interesting because he said, when you focus on your deficits and your gaps and where you really need to work, the highest point of success you'll ever get is mediocre. But
Hmm.
if you work on your strengths, the ability to succeed to exponential is unknown. So if you had the resilient roundtable during business meetings, team meetings, leadership, even in HR hiring practices, and you help people identify the resilient traits of flexibility, competence, self-worth, independence, service, right?
Yeah.
It's the opportunity to empower, to give self-determination to people to expand on their professional and personal lives. And the origination of ideas is endless.
Yeah. I strongly believe if I focus on my strengths, my weaknesses will improve.
Mhm.
It's natural. But if I focus on my weaknesses, my strengths will actually reduce.
Yeah.
They'll lower.
Yeah.
So, what are some of the other traits that are help identify resilience?
Well, kind of like you were saying with your dad and then grandpa, right? The
Mhm.
bike. And if we look at past generations and what we got, the perseverance. So stuff happens, right? It happens to good people, it happens to everybody. But what is the drive to come again, to try again? So when you look at the perseverance and that belief and hope, look at everything that's going around in the world. Let's take COVID. The whole world was under a pandemic. And I see COVID as an opportunity for all of us to learn in the world, right? And when it comes to resilience and trauma and conflict resilience, we got to look at COVID came, the pandemic came. We were all, I call it, we were all on house arrest, right? Everybody, depending on what city, what province, had rules, but basically nobody was out. And then everything opened up and it was uncomfortable for everybody because it was an incident. It was a traumatic incident to different levels, and that anxiety was there. And we have to recognize we have to grieve our way of life before because it changed everything. And as we move forward, you can't repeat, so it'll never be the same. But now's the time for us across the world of all ages, but especially adults, that we help identify what were those resilient risk mitigation traits that got us through personally, professionally, operationally, organizationally. And to identify them, name them, give kudos to others, to yourself, of where you've come since that point in time, because these traits, again, we need to create that intergenerational leadership legacy of conflict and trauma resiliency for the future generations. Because 7 generations from this pandemic are going to be impacted. So when you look at the kids and the younger kids in school and the lack of having that social awareness and how to make friends and talk and not just be on your phone because you were stuck at home all the time, right?
Mhm.
It's here's the time where we have to identify all those risks, those incidents, those traumas, and turn them into those assets of strength and hope and skill set building, because we are creating that leadership legacy for the next 7 generations of conflict and trauma resiliency.
Why do so many people have such a difficult time? Because it it, it sounds so logical and makes sense, but yet you probably know people, and I definitely know I know people
Yeah.
that just repeat the same thing over and over and over again and never learn. So what is it that they aren't doing? At some point in their life, they've got to learn
Yeah.
something,
I
but
think
it's
I
just,
don't I don't think there's a general answer because everybody's an individual and it's based on your life experiences. And it's not learning. Everybody has learned something. It's whether you're choosing to apply your learning and grow and move forward, or you're
mm,
comfortable where you are. And sometimes discomfort, like coming from background in clinical and counseling and that, not making a choice is a choice. And sometimes
yeah.
discomfort is more comfortable than taking a chance to the unknown because there's that unknown fear. And it depends on your personal circumstances, your resilient support system, the tools you have. And there's no right or wrong because it's your own personal journey.
Eh, I like what you said, we may learn something, each of us may learn something different. It could be that they're just not learning the right thing that moves them forward. They're learning something, but they're not learning something that moves them forward.
No, no, let's put it in this context because I used to be a behavioral consultant as well in many lifetimes. So it's like going to university, right? I got a couple of degrees, certs. My first degree, I mastered going to school, not going to school for 1 full week, never went to all my classes, graduated. You can sit in school and not retain anything and still pass, right? It's a skill
Right.
set to how to master, how to write exams and that, right? But when you look at behaviors and changing behaviors and performance, you have to be able to measure it and identify it and name it. So you can learn a skill. I call it, is it a barrier, an obstacle, or a challenge? So a barrier is like you're going to go climb Mount Everest. Nobody can just go climb Mount Everest. It's a barrier because you have to train for it. You have to go get all the right tools, everything to help you climb it. And there's a process and systems and a whole training plan. And without doing that, you still have a barrier because you're not going to be able to climb Mount Everest. So you need skills and you need to practice those skills to develop the performance to climb that mountain. If it's an obstacle, just like running the obstacle race, technically you already have those skills. But the obstacle is you got to decide how you're going to use your skills depending on what the outcome is you're looking for. And are you going to go over the obstacle, under it, or around it to the left, or around it to the right? 4 options. You have the skills. Now you got to do a cost benefit analysis, is what is your best opportunity with all the factors you're considering to get to your outcome or goal with the obstacles. When you're looking at the challenges, that comes down to the paper, the policies, the processes. And are you understanding what the policies, processes, systems are that are challenging you from getting to the next step? So do you reread them? Do you get interpret them? Do you go get some consultation? Do you get some coaching? Do you just have a brainstorming session with others to get others' perspectives to understand what is the challenge to help you make the informed decision, be self-determined to make that choice and have a voice, and then go get your outcome?
Well, we're already at time for a second segment, but I want to ask you, I don't want to lose this question in my head. Does timing play a part in this too? Because you gave a great example there of talking with your support network to help you make a decision, but then other people can make a decision right off the bat. So does timing play some sort of a factor anywhere?
Timing is everything in life. And whether you choose to take the advantage of when the timing presents itself to ask questions, right? Sometimes we don't take those opportunities when they're right there in front of us. And then that's where, if they pass, you got to decide, are you going to get up the courage, the vulnerability to go re-ask those questions when the timing has passed? Or are you just going to say, I'll wait till the next time? And that's an individual choice.
Yeah. On that note, we've come to the end of our second segment. We are talking with Treena Reilkoff on turning trauma into a resilient asset, and we will be right back. If you liked that video, thumbs up. If you didn't like that video, thumbs down. But leave me a message and let me know your thoughts. Of course, don't forget to subscribe. And in the meantime, stay prepared, everybody.